We accept the love we think we deserve. Stephen Chbosky. You remember what it felt like at the beginning. The attention was relentless. The messages, the calls, the way they made you feel, like you were the only person in an entire world of people worth paying attention to. They moved fast. Faster than felt normal. But it felt so good that normal seemed like a limitation you were glad to be free of. They said things people only say after months, after years. They said them in weeks, sometimes days. And you wondered briefly if it was too much. And then they did something else that made you forget you had wondered. That wondering. That brief moment of instinct before the next wave of attention arrived. Was your nervous system trying to tell you something? Today we go into love bombing. What it actually is, why it works so completely, what happens when it stops, and the question you need to learn to ask before you trust someone's intensity. Stay with me through point 4, because that is the one that explains why you felt responsible for making the good version come back. Love bombing is not enthusiasm. It is not passion. It is not chemistry. Love bombing is the systematic overwhelming of another person with attention, affection, and apparent devotion in order to create rapid emotional dependency before the relationship has earned that dependency. The key word is systematic. Love bombing is not what it looks like, an outpouring of genuine feeling. It is a strategy, consciously or unconsciously deployed, with a specific objective. That objective is dependency. By creating the experience of extraordinary connection very quickly, by flooding the target with the feeling of being seen, chosen, and irreplaceable, the love bomber establishes a neurochemical baseline of extraordinary intensity, a standard of warmth and attention that will later serve as the thing that is withheld. You cannot withhold something that was never given. Love bombing is the giving that makes the withholding possible. 3 characteristics distinguish love bombing from genuine intensity. Speed. The timeline is compressed beyond what intimacy actually requires. Disproportion. The attention is more than the relationship warrants. And conditionality. Though it takes time to see it, the attention will eventually prove to be contingent on your behavior in ways that genuine love never is. Love bombing works because it activates something more fundamental than romantic attraction. The human need to be seen, genuinely, specifically, irreplaceably seen, is one of the deepest drives in human psychology. Most people spend their lives in a chronic, low-grade state of being somewhat unseen, somewhat generic, somewhat replaceable in the spaces they occupy. When someone arrives and makes you feel like the exception, like you specifically are remarkable, fascinating, the person they have been waiting for, the neurological response is not something you can simply choose to override. Oxytocin surges, the bonding hormone. Dopamine surges, anticipatory reward. Cortisol drops as the chronic low-grade anxiety of feeling unseen suddenly lifts. The experience is physiologically overwhelming, and it is designed to be. No one is immune to this. Studies of love bombing victims show no consistent personality profile, no consistent insecurity level, no consistent history that predicts vulnerability. High self-esteem, secure attachment, previous therapy, none of these reliably protect. The vulnerability is not a flaw in you. The vulnerability is in being human. Then something changes. Not dramatically at first. A message that takes longer than usual. A moment of coolness where warmth was. A cancellation. A distraction that wouldn't have existed before. And you notice it. Of course you notice it. Because you have been calibrated to extraordinary attention. Your baseline has been set at a level of connection that was never sustainable, because it was never real. And here is where love bombing's damage becomes most clear. Because the natural human response to the withdrawal of something you had is to ask what changed, what you did, what you could do differently, to try to restore what was there before. But the love bombing phase was not something you maintained by being a certain way. It was something they produced to create a specific effect. And now it is being withdrawn to create a different, specific effect. The withdrawal produces anxiety. The anxiety produces pursuit. The pursuit produces control. The entire sequence was designed. The warmth was the setup. The withdrawal was the mechanism. And your attempt to restore the warmth was the intended outcome. Point 4. This is the one I told you to wait for. You were not trying to get them back. You were trying to get yourself back. During the love bombing phase, something happened to you that you may not have named. You felt a version of yourself that you had never quite been before. More seen, more known, more important, more alive. And when the withdrawal came, what you lost was not just their attention. You lost the version of yourself that their attention had activated. The pursuit that followed was not weakness, it was grief. Grief for a self-experience that no one told you had been manufactured to be taken away. This is why love bombing survivors often describe feeling like they lost themselves in the relationship, not just the person. Because something about who they were in those early weeks felt more real than who they had been before. And recovering means understanding that the person who made you feel that way did not create that version of you. They revealed a capacity you already had. The ability to feel seen, to open, to connect at that level. That capacity is yours. It was always yours. It does not require them to exist. The question is not whether intensity is bad. Some people move fast. Some connections are genuine and immediate. The question is, what kind of intensity is this? Genuine intensity is interested in you specifically, in what you think, what you have experienced, who you are becoming. It asks questions. It waits for answers. It adjusts based on what it learns. Love bombing intensity is interested in the effect it produces in you. The questions are tools for calibration, for learning what makes you feel seen, so that more of it can be deployed. It does not adjust as you reveal yourself. It adjusts as the strategy requires. 3 questions to hold when intensity arrives early. First, do I feel like they know me, or do I feel like they adore me? Knowing requires time. Adoration can be instant. One is connection. The other is a projection of what they need you to be. Second, does their attention slow down when I slow down, or does it maintain pressure regardless of my pace? Third, how do they respond when I express a need of my own? With genuine interest, or with a return to what they were already giving? After love bombing comes what researchers call devaluation. The attention diminishes. The affection becomes conditional. The person who once found everything about you remarkable begins finding things to critique. Small things at first, then larger ones. This transition is profoundly disorienting because the love bombing has established a cognitive framework in which this person is someone who sees your worth completely. The devaluation contradicts that framework, and the mind, working to protect the investment made, defaults to self-blame rather than revision of the framework. If they no longer see my worth as fully as they did, perhaps the problem is in my worth. Perhaps I need to perform better, try harder, be different. This is not a logical error. It is the consequence of a baseline that was never honestly established. The devaluation is also strategic, not always consciously, but functionally. Devaluing someone who has bonded to you produces exactly the insecurity that makes continued control easier to maintain. Recovery from love bombing requires confronting a specific and difficult truth. The connection you felt was real. The feelings were real. The version of yourself you experienced was real. The relationship was not. The love you felt was real. The love you received was a performance. And holding both of those things simultaneously, without collapsing one into the other, is the core work of recovery. What helps most, according to the clinical research, is rebuilding the understanding of what love actually looks like over time. Not in the intensity of the beginning, but in the consistency of the long middle. In the mundane reliability of someone who shows up, not because they need something from you, but because you are someone they chose to show up for. Healthy love is boring by love bombing standards. It does not produce the same neurochemical surge. It does not make you feel extraordinary in every moment. But it does not take you away either. Love bombing. The setup. The withdrawal. The pursuit. The control. A sequence so consistent that researchers can map it with near clinical precision, and yet so effective that knowing it exists does not reliably protect against experiencing it. Because it is not a trick for the naive. It is a physiological ambush for the human. What you can do with what you know now is name it earlier. Not as a punishment to your instincts, but as a check on your timeline. Slow down. Not because good things cannot happen fast, but because dependency should be earned, not installed. Drop a number in the comments. How many of the phases we described today did you recognize in something you experienced? Subscribe, because next week we go into the 9 tactics of emotional manipulation that are being used on you in ordinary daily life. Not in dramatic, abusive situations, in regular conversations, with regular people, in ways you have probably never named. They didn't fall in love with you. They fell in love with your potential to become what they needed.